Still in the public hearing for emergency ordinance 1191, which is a emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, continuing the city's declaration of a local emergency and acknowledgement of a statewide emergency resulting from COVID-19, and amending the City of Cordova Health Advisory Plan to supplement Appendix A with an updated alert matrix. That call-in number is 253-6202. We'll offer one final chance for a call-in for any comment. And seeing none, we will adjourn the public hearing. I'll call the regular City Council meeting of September 2nd, 2020 to order at 7 p.m. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland.
Here.
Tom Baylor.
Here.
Kathy Sherman.
Here.
Jeff Guard.
Here.
Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent. David Allison.
Here.
David Gleason.
I'm here.
That's a quorum of council.
Move to approve the regular agenda with item 13 removed. Second.
I have a motion to approve the regular agenda with the removal of item 13. Any other requested modifications? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
On approval of the agenda with item 13 removed. David Allison.
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent. David Gleason.
Yes.
Kathy Sherman.
Yes.
Melina Meyer.
Yes.
Tom Baylor.
Yes.
And Jeff Guard.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Does council have any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications to disclose? Hearing none, we have communications by and petitions from visitors. Guest speaker, incident management team for a COVID-19 update. Do we have any guest speaker online for that?
Hannah Sanders is here, but I don't know if Helen wants to give an update. You want me to?
Why don't you go ahead?
So I think in terms of an update, the city continues to do well. We have the one active case and are continuing to navigate heading into fall weather and trying to still screen airport passengers as the state guidance has asked us to do. So we've had to pivot a little bit in how we're doing the airport screening, but everybody responded really quickly, and that's continuing. And from a hospital clinic readiness, we're continuing to test, and I think things are going very well.
Are there any questions, council? Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, Dr. Sanders, is Tom Baylor. So just kind of some clarification as far as the testing. Do we have adequate testing? Because I bring that up because I had a family member return 2 weeks ago, and they did try to get a test before coming to the state, but it's very difficult to get a test and get results within 72 hours in a lot of places. So when they got here, they then went out to the tent and said, well, we're here, we'd like to get tested. And they asked if they'd been tested, and they said, well, yeah, but we don't have the results. And they said, well, go home and quarantine for 14 days. We're not going to test you because we're low on testing. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. They're here to fish and hike and sightsee, so we went about our business. I know at the last meeting there was a big discussion about how people aren't obeying the state law when they come into town, but I thought it was odd. You had somebody that really wanted to follow the rules, get the testing, you know, do their business, willing to pay for it even though they're residents, and they're saying, no, you're not going to get tested. So the end result is they did get their result like 3 days after they were here. You know, my wife and I got tested and we never did get the results. So this whole idea of, you know, go home and stay isolated for 14 days. I can see why people aren't kind of following that. So what's your thought on that as far as, are we low on testing? Is that why we're not offering these tests?
So in terms of the testing, our supply here is still intact, but the supply chain itself is potentially not intact and non-existent, so we would have to pivot to send out. But our supply chain is intact. We are following state guidance in terms of how we repeat the testing in order to preserve not just ours, but the entire state's testing capacity. The guidelines say that you test and then come to Cordova. That negative test result doesn't actually mean that you couldn't have been exposed and end up developing COVID symptoms, especially in the setting of a lot of people having very mild illness. So the guidance says that you have to strict social distance until you get that second test, which is at 7 to 10 or 14 days. So no matter if you have your result in hand or not, if you're tested 72 hours prior to travel, you're still expected to strict social distance. And so that guidance doesn't change until your second test. And so if you get your second test in Cordova, then after both of those, the strict social distance turns into just social distance, which kind of created all these new terms and definitions. But the definition of that is now you are no longer asked to please not go into stores, but you're allowed to go into stores. And still, the state does recommend some continued social distancing, of course. So that's part of the reason we aren't repeating those tests for somebody that's already had it within 72 hours. The guidance doesn't change for what you're permitted to do within that 7-day period.
So basically, you would, if you're traveling the state, you'd be better off not getting a test. Come up here and say, no, I haven't had a test, and then you'll get tested right away. That's what you're saying, right?
So then the state is asking people, well, if you're a resident, then yes, then you would be tested right away. And if you're a non-resident, then the state requires that you pay $250 on the state portal for the test and could have it completed.
Right.
That recommendation for not testing or how to test and would vary from community to community in terms of their access. But for us, right now, we continue to have pretty fast results and are able to process all of our tests here locally.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. So that, because clarification will be helpful though, because my wife is traveling now, so she'll be gone for a while. So she would be better off not getting tested, coming up here, saying, nope, I haven't been tested. Then she'd be afforded a test. If she got a test before she came, then you'd say, no, now you got to wait 7 to 14 days before we retest you.
Yes, that would be what she'd be told here. And then
Okay.
also in Anchorage, depending on how you travel, if you go through the line in Anchorage, they would do the same and they might test you there.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps.
And I just want to make one more little point on that. Anyone who arrives in Cordova from an out-of-state location that hasn't gotten their test results have to quarantine until those first results come in. Then, from that moment of test results, assuming it's negative, until they get a second test, they have to strict social distance, which means you can't go into grocery stores, you can't be in public places. So we're trying really hard, and I know the state's trying really hard to get the information out about that, but there's still some confusion, and I understand why, because it seems to change. But this is a pretty solid program that the state is rolling out, and we just need to make sure that everyone really understands it. But for anyone who's a resident and or a non-resident traveling into Cordova or any Alaskan city from outside of the state, you have to have a negative test result before you can leave your isolation place.
Are there other questions, council, for Dr. Sanders? Online?
Yeah, this is Lynn.
Councilman Meyer.
I guess I just wanted to touch a little bit about the schools, Dr. Sanders. I don't know. I just assume that you've been involved in that a little bit. So you could just talk about a little bit about what they're doing. And I was kind of curious if they had a closing plan or what their testing protocol is, and how they'd go about that if they had to close for some reason. We hope not, but plan. planning's important. So just wanted to see if you could touch on the schools reopening.
Sure. I have been working closely with the schools and trying to make sure that we're following the state and CDC guidance in terms of the safe reopening plans. They do have plans for at what point, following state guidance, that they would have to close, and it would depend on either a very large community outbreak or some type of outbreak that's occurring in the schools, and those things are kind of mapped out as best we can with the awareness that things change really quickly in the setting of COVID. There is the screening tests for COVID for restarting schools has actually been discouraged from the CDC and the State Department of Health, so we are not doing any specific screening tests prior to restarting. A lot of times the screening testing in those settings, people change their behaviors because of the testing, and it gives people a false sense of security. So it is felt that the very close symptom monitoring in the setting of a community with low disease burden like ourselves, that it is better to just monitor symptoms. And so that's what we are doing at this point. They have excellent plans in terms of entering and exiting and managing children that have any symptoms and need to return home. And they've done kind of some walkthroughs of different scenarios and what would happen in each case. And I've also gone to each of the schools and reviewed with a small subset of people appropriate use of PPE and how to don and off that PPE in the event that they have to use it due to a sick child. So I really am amazed that with the response that the teachers are having in the schools and how they're really trying to figure out safe reopening plans, recognizing that we are a community that does have some families that are multi-generational homes and really have some high-risk people, and I feel confident that we are working on a safe approach.
So I'm going to, we're still in discussion with Dr. Sanders on the COVID-19 update, but I just want to mention that our next item is audience comments, and if you would like to comment on the agenda, that call-in number is 253-6202 to call in and comment on the agenda. Is there other council comments online or questions of Dr. Sanders?
This is Melina. I did have one more question for Dr.
Yeah. Yes, Vice Mayor Merritt.
Later up on our agenda, we're talking a little bit about in-person meetings again, and when council should start having our meetings in person and allowing the public in. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but I wanted to get maybe your take, medical take on that a little bit.
I think that how we congregate in different settings is a personal risk decision. I think that people now have a pretty good understanding, as best we can at this point in time, for an illness that we have seen for going on maybe 10 months, that we've got that much data on, which is really new when you look at this illness. But I think people understand the risk, and so giving people the option, I think, is important. A lot of the big bodies of evidence still suggest that when you can hold meetings remotely and not congregate, that people should still be doing those things and still working from home. In a community where you have a very low disease burden, having a meeting and having people wear masks and socially distance and wash their hands is probably a safe activity. So I think if you all decided that, that certainly, you wouldn't be getting any criticism from the medical community here. My understanding is that we do expect that churches are gathering and trying to maintain that social distance, but still congregating. So I don't think that this would be significantly different from that setting.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
Other questions, council?
I've got one. This is Councilmember Gard, and I don't know that it's specifically for Dr. Sanders, but it has to do with enforcement of the state mandates. We recently had a bunch of out-of-town sport fishermen down in the harbor using the cleaning stations, wearing no mask, refusing to wear masks. I've heard stories of out-of-town folks coming in with no tests and refusing to go to the portal and getting tested. Do we have any kind of enforcement stuff we're looking at doing, or is this all just gonna be quote-unquote personal responsibility forever and ever, and we just write these rules or mandates on paper and then don't worry about them?
That's for the COVID discussion.
Anybody?
I say that's for the
I don't know if I
COVID
have an
discussion.
answer to that. I do know that people are signing affidavit with the state that they'll follow these guidelines, and there certainly are some fine some statements that they could be fined in certain ways. From what I've heard from the ambassadors, is there is the occasional person that is doing that. However, the numbers that we're seeing, I think that we are seeing a fair amount of compliance with the testing prior to people arriving. So.
I understand, but then the question wasn't so much for you, and that was unfair of me to do that. But my question's back to enforcement again.
So why don't we
State
get,
and locally, we make mandates and put out orders, but we have enforced exactly 0% of anything.
okay, we can park that for our discussion of COVID-19 emergency response a little later on the agenda. If you have suggestions or other questions for Dr. Sanders on update the current state of COVID-19. Okay, hearing none, thank you again, Dr. Sanders, for calling in and for all you do. Appreciate it. So audience comments regarding agenda items. That call-in number again is 253-6202. Okay, hearing none, chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. Do we have a CCMC authority board?
Not today. You get me again.
We'll take it.
Donna Sanders. So the hospital continues to work on being COVID ready. We've been able to apply CARES funds, grants, and also community support, including the great support that we got from NBE so that we can improve our respiratory illness readiness. We've received equipment and continue to order and slowly are receiving some of that equipment over the next month or two because supply chains continue to be somewhat limited and slow for many different types of equipment. So that seems to be going well. We are expecting our 2019 audit to be finalized here in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Our cost report should be finalized sometime in that similar period. Everything looks good, and it looks like we will be able to improve some of our reimbursement after that cost report. So that everything's looking positive from a financial standpoint for the hospital at this point. We're still hoping to be able to retain the CARES fund to offset some of our historical needs and over the next year. And that's all I have, but I'm here for questions regarding the hospital if you have any.
Council, any questions? Councilman Baylor?
Yeah. First of all, I met the new doctor, and perhaps you could give us his name. I'm terrible on names.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. We have Dr. Paul Glow that is a long-time Alaskan but has chosen Cordova as his home to raise his family, and he has 2 daughters that have moved to Cordova and will be starting school here, and he's very excited to be here in our community and make Cordova his home. And he is seeing patients.
Anything? Yeah, he bought a house next to some property that I own, and I got to meet him and his wife and his 2 really cute daughters. They're twins. Didn't take but a second to realize that. He likes to subsistence fish and hunt, so hopefully he's a good doctor, but you get people that like this kind of country, that goes a long way for them staying here. The other question I had is, and you may not know the answer, and if you don't, you can get back to us maybe later, but the Cordova rumor mill has it that the hospital has been negotiating or looking into buying a piece of property to build an apartment complex. Is that just, one of those rumors that go around, or are they actually doing that?
No, and I imagine if we were ever, I mean, I'd hope that I would know about it if we were, but
Okay.
yeah, I assume you guys would also know about that. No, I think, you know, my entire time at the hospital, we always have had a fair number of travelers, and so we certainly use a large number of rentals, and so that has come up as an idea that has circulated over time. Never has it developed anything more than an idea. And actually, I've been pretty proud that our burden of travelers has been steadily decreasing over the past few months. And it looks like close to 80% of my nursing staff is permanent employees coming over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So, yeah, no building plans in our future that I know of.
All right. Another Cordova rumor squashed. Thank you.
Darn. Any other questions from council online? CCMC Authority Board report? Okay, thank you again, Dr. Sanders. Appreciate it. Do we have a school board representative or school board report?
This is Barb Rule. I'm on the line.
Thank you, Barb. Go ahead, please.
So as many of you have seen and heard, school has started in a very phased opening kind of way. This last week has been online school with the students. Students will start into the building next week in small cohorts. Half will go next week, half will go the following week, and then if all goes well, fingers crossed, everyone's safe, by the third week of in-person school, all students will be attending school in person for some period of time during the day. Our focus, the district's focus, both board and administration, has been on making sure that students can be educated safely and that teachers can be in the building safely, and that we have the resources we need to start doing school again. We are baby stepping through it, and as Dr. Singer said, she has been a great help in ensuring that our practices are sound. Additionally, we're following the state and Department of Ed guidelines in how we start back to doing school and to doing in-person school. I've been very impressed and deeply respectful of everyone's willingness to walk through this very carefully and to start in phases, parents, students, and staff. I've heard that people are happy that we're open for business and starting to have students come into the building. There's also some trepidation, certainly, as we look around the state and see schools in Matthew and Anchorage closing because of outbreaks. So we will continue to monitor very carefully. But with the low incident in Cordova, we're hopeful and fingers crossed that we continue to follow the path to in-person education. I was listening to the work session previous to this and certainly appreciate the council members' willingness to entertain requests for CARES fund from the school. As the city manager talked about, we certainly at the school are running into what are things that we would need and can accomplish before December 31st. I think as we've been able to develop the full reopening plan, we can now start looking at funding needs. Again, another challenge is we do not have a full handle on student count. There are numbers of students and families that have chosen to homeschool outside of the district. We don't have a firm number on that. And of course, the student count doesn't take place until October, and those numbers will have an impact on our funding. We can't quite predict what that is yet. But appreciate the willingness, and I know that the administration is communicating with the city manager about those needs. Again, I want to express my appreciation both for the patience that the community has shown and also the enormous hard work that the staff and students and parents are doing to make school happen in Cordova. Happy to answer any questions that I might be able to answer.
Okay, thank you. Any council online have questions? Hearing none. Any questions in the room? Okay, thank you, Barb. I appreciate your report and appreciate the working relationship with the CCMC, especially recruiting doctors with school-age children to help our foundation formula. Councilman Baylor.
So as you know, I'm the representative for Prince William Sound Agricultural Corporation,
Yes.
and I don't have anything new to add. As you can imagine, it's kind of tight-lipped. I usually, through the year would walk into the office and kind of get updates and talk with folks, but that's not really viable to do now. Fishing season, as you all know, is coming to a close. We know the silvers and reds weren't all that great. I don't know how the seining went. Those numbers, that's just closing down, and the silvers are going. So the next thing is their annual fall board meeting, and I think that's going to end up being a virtual meeting. So I don't have anything to report at this time, but just kind of give you an update that we are looking at it, and when we've got something to bring, we'll bring it.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Baylor, and appreciate your work on that board and keeping council updated. And you reminded me of something to take a note here for the mayor's report. Okay, next item is student council representative, of course. Haven't started that process yet. And so we'll move to the consent calendar. We have one item there. Any objection to leaving it there? Roll call vote, please.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
David Gleason.
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Okay, the minutes of the consent calendar approved as submitted. We don't have bids to consider today, so reports of officers. Mayor's report, I've been doing these verbally. It's probably going to continue for a while. I just want to re-emphasize to the community the importance of voting. And I just want to give you an example. Say a community 4 times our size only has half of the eligible population registered to vote, and 50% of those vote. That would be 1,000 votes from that fairly large community. If Cordova had 1,500 eligible voters, but 2/3 of them registered to vote, and they all voted, for example, we would have the same 1,000 votes. And so when representatives run for office, they look at all the voting records for all the communities, and they defer to the communities that the votes come from. So it really doesn't matter in one regard, whether a Democrat is elected or a Republican or an independent, or how our votes parcel out. When they see a community that votes heavily, it gets their attention. So it's really important. I'd really like to see a community effort, even a joint effort, as crazy as this might sound, between the parties and independents to really try to get citizens registered and to really promote the vote this year. It's an important year at the state and federal level. And we've really seen some interesting dynamics in the primaries. And Bitney's been keeping me really well updated. We had a whole bunch of votes come in, and then as absentees came in, those seats flipped. It looks like our senator from our region is going to stay intact, but for quite a bit of the vote there, we had a road system representative, which represents a very small part of our district, that was in the lead there. So just something to be cognizant of. I just happened to mention earlier today, but just within earshot of council, something Bitney and I have really been working on with previous administrations and this one, and the Department of Revenue, is trying to get earlier visibility on our raw fish tax revenues. They have all the numbers in April, as Councilman Allison mentioned, and we don't get to see those until October, and it's a substantial part of our budget. So last fall, when we were able to meet with the Commissioner of Revenue in Anchorage, he said, no problem. They can signal us. So I just wanted to let Helen and Ken know that I think a phone call, it's the first time that we've had that kind of open response, and really appreciated it. And in fact, he said they were in the process, I don't know how the pandemic would affect this, but they were in the process of making those available generically, but at least to show the dollar amounts online. So that would be a big step forward for us to have a little more, before we go through our budgeting process, to have a better idea what revenues are going to be for the next year. So we had Congressman Young visit Cordova this week. I apologize for the short notice to council. They had canceled one trip for last Monday, and the dynamics of the House going in and out of session have been kind of interesting, but we had really good representation from the community, the Coast Guard Commander, PISWAC, our Marketing Association, CDFU, Prince William Sound Science Director, Manager Howarth, city staff, and a lot of citizens were able to meet both at the meet and greet, some individual meetings, and then the meetings here at City Hall, and then Vice Mayor Meyer as well. So I just wanted to relate some of the things, Manager Howarth touched on this earlier, that Congressman Young personally would like to see some extension of the CARES Act deadlines. Said the communities just haven't had time to identify and execute responsible projects. Hate to see that money just kind of get poured on the ground or underutilized. So he's going to be pushing. He said, don't be surprised if that happens. They do have 2 weeks of session left this month, and then he anticipates a lame duck session where many congressmen are not going to get reelected to their seats, but they're still going to be in office. And he said, unfortunately, that's when a lot of business gets done because they have nothing to lose and no political axes to grind. So he anticipates maybe seeing some fairly productive work done by the House here before the end of the session. He's very concerned about the marine highway system. Many of you may know that he sponsored the initial legislation to create a federal marine highway system for Alaska so that we had access to the federal funding. He said that's increasingly hard to maintain support for, and he said it's going to be really hard if we're not running the ferries. He said that the state has, we're putting he and the delegation in a precarious position to keep the federal funding flowing to that program if the state's not going to operate the ferries. So he emphasized the importance, if we have to regionalize or drive that service from the community levels, then we need to pursue that. I know we have the new economic development director, Kristen Carpenter, here in Cordova. She's been working with the city manager, the community and other communities to look at an effort by the Prince William Sound. And I want to work with her and the manager to bring forward a letter or a council resolution, a regional signal to the state that that we're moving in that direction, perhaps, and that we don't want the state selling vessels or liquidating or keeping them unavailable because, you know, so I think it would be good for us to send that signal that if they're not going to run the ferries, that we're going to make efforts to do that, and for them not to make any big moves with ferries that could be serving our region, because there are other paths for us to get federal funds to continue that system. Also, I know that council has, you do a lot of volunteer work and you participate in a lot of things. We do occasionally have commissioners, the state commissioners come through, particularly Fish and Game and Alaska Marine Highway System. It's probably good for them to hear from us, but when we do have our congressional delegation in town, it would be good if council could get a little FaceTime with them. The notice was rather short on this visit, but in the past, we just haven't had good participation. Fortunately, we have had real good representation from Helen, our city manager now, with all the visits by commissioners and so forth. But I do want to mention early that we tentatively have Senator Sullivan coming October 9th and 10th. That is our target date for the Coast Guard Appreciation or the celebration, I guess, of the naming of Cordova as a Coast Guard city. There's a chance Rear Admiral Ray will be able to attend that, and then Admiral Bell from 17th District in Alaska. So we hope that can happen, and it would be great to have an opportunity to celebrate that. So that's, I think, what I had for a verbal report. Is there any questions?
I just comment, I did show up for the 10:30 meet and greet, and at 11:15 I left.
Yeah, I saw that. And we were running late. We got tangled up a little bit at CCMC. It was really good for the congressman to see what we're doing there, and we got slowed up a little bit. But I did see you show up and appreciate that. So, and it is hard sometimes when we stack meetings one on top of another. But any other comments? Okay, city manager's report.
Just a few things to report on. Number one, we have 3 applicants that we're interviewing tomorrow for our new public communications special projects position. That is Jason Gabrielson had left our employ, and we had an opportunity to reshape his position to more adequately fulfill our needs at this moment in time. So I should have that position filled by our next board meeting, and we'll have someone on the ground soon. City Hall is reopening. For those that came here to this meeting in person, we do have everything in place to provide a safe experience for anyone visiting the library, the museum, or coming to do business with City Hall, and for those who might want to be in person for city council meetings. So if that is at the will of council for the future, we are prepared for that. Every restroom facility, every public-facing space that we have has sneeze guards. We have hand sanitizer. We know the limitations and are very strictly social distancing our chairs for public view, and we will have an ambassador at the front door to screen any individual that comes into the building to make sure that they are going to be safe participants in our space. So we will reopen on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, the museum and library will have limited hours, but will be available for walk-in and appointments so that the people can actually come into the building. City Hall will still be available for any kind of phone type of interaction, but if someone has business to do here in City Hall, we will have one room where visitors and staff will meet scheduled, and there'll be a cleaning regime that will make sure everyone is in a safe place. So we're excited about that. I think given the school's reopening, and we have our public facilities like Bedarkie and Pool reopening, I think it is time, and we are definitely prepared and have had the medical team review our plan to make sure it meets the health standards. So I think we're in a good place. The other thing, we are in the midst of our audit. You heard the medical center report that they're doing an audit. Our audits are merged, so we are coordinating that, and we'll have a report on that in the not too distant future. And then I will save any reports on the EMT and our airport, some of the questions that came up from council to when we talk about our COVID response here in a little bit. I'm done, thank you.
Is there any questions, council?
Just a quick comment that I think the school board president may have forgot to mention that the school board will also be meeting in person in September. So they're also opening up their meetings.
Manager Howarth?
I forgot one thing, and it's even in a bullet point right in front of my face. I overlooked. I just wanted to share with you the public safety survey that we put out. The results, we ended the survey on Monday. We've had over 200 responses. Those survey results will be compiled probably by Friday. A lot of community comments, not just filling in the buttons, but actually giving comments that I think will provide some valuable feedback to all of us as we consider how to move forward. So as soon as those results are available, I'll make sure they're disseminated to all of you.
As far as opening up for council meetings and stuff, will there be an ambassador at the front door there? Okay, that's a yes. And then I noticed a sign-in sheet up there. Will people sign themselves in, or will that just be if there's an ambassador there, they'll sign people in?
The doors will not be open unless there's an ambassador at the front. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great.
10 to 4, right. So we aren't open normal 8 to 5. Right now, we're open 10 to 4. And that will change as we gain experience, but that will be the hours that the library and the museum are open as well. So we'll have an ambassador during those 10 to 4 hours.
Okay.
And for council meetings, we'll have someone at the front door. If we do in public meetings and public's invited, we will have someone at the front door.
Okay, and that was my last question. So the council meetings will be open to the public?
If you choose to go that way.
There's an agenda item later in the meeting.
Okay. Any other questions of Manager Howard? Clerk's report.
So the city attorney has finished the Title II draft, which I just got last night, so I haven't read it yet, but we're hoping for a first reading at the next council meeting, which is a complete rewrite of Title II, which is elections. And then I've organized that training, that Zoom training with Ann McFarlane from Jurassic Parliament. I've sent emails to all the boards and commissions, city boards and commissions, to invite them. And I've heard one response so far. And it's by Zoom, so even if, obviously, if people are not around or in town, they can still attend from wherever they might be. And looking forward to that. I think we should wind up with 30 or 40 people, and she didn't really want more than 50, I think she said. That's all I have to report.
Any questions, Council? Councilman Ellison.
Yeah, was that able to be recorded for viewing later?
I know, I need to find out about that, but I'm not 100% sure because,
Okay. I will be out of town, but I will not be able to call
okay,
or get online for that
right.
particular day, but I would be able to view it, maybe 2 days later.
Right, I'll find out.
Okay.
Is there any other questions for City Clerk? For Council online?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, is that Councilman Vice Mayor Meyer?
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I was having trouble. I wanted to thank the city manager and all her staff for preparing to open City Hall. I know that probably wasn't an easy task in getting things ready, depending on how we go with the council meetings, but it sounds like there's a lot of good things in place and really appreciate all that effort. And then as far as the clerk's report, I think the Zoom meeting, I know I didn't answer your email yet, but I think that would be a really good opportunity for all of us and anybody else that can take that for some training and all of us be able to get it. So I'll answer you now. I'll be attending if that goes through. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. We have correspondence in the packet. I just want to mention on the first item 9, the AMHS letter requesting membership in, or the Friends of the Alaska Marine Highway System letter requesting membership in the group. I'd received that letter back in October. We didn't have it as an action item. And I think it's been characterized that Cordova is a member of that group. And I had indicated we might be interested, but I just wanted council to know that I didn't make us a member, and that would require council action. So they've been somewhat active, and there are several communities and organizations represented. So if council wants to take action on that, you can. And then we have a Prince William Sound Regional Citizens Advisory letter to our federal delegation and copied you regarding oil spill risk, heightened risk at this time, I guess.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Ellison.
Yeah, what kind of action are you wanting with that AMHS? Are we plan on bringing something further to council, or do you just need a consensus from the council that we would be part of that group? At this point, they're not asking for money or anything.
No, there's no money. They're not asking any money. It could be council concurrence, I guess, or we could take it up under the pending agenda.
It could, it would be fine for concurrence. It's the second time it's been in a packet, I would think.
Yeah, is there any council objection to Cordova being listed as a friend of the Alaska Marine Highway System Group? Okay, hearing none, then we'll just legitimize that. They have us listed anyway, so thank you, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, my other comment was on the other Prince William Sound Regional Citizens Advisory Council. Can we get an update from our RCAC representative at one of the
Yes,
coming meetings?
good point. And
I
I
haven't heard from them in a while.
I did mention to them that we would like to hear from them periodically, so we'll do that. And that's Robert Beadle.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and you can reach out to him, Susan.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I will.
Any other discussion on correspondence?
Yeah, this is Selena.
Yes, Vice Mayor Meyer.
A little bit about the Friends of the Alaska Marine Highway System. I just kind of went on their website to kind of see what they're about. Their mission statement seems pretty straightforward. It's in line with our goals of public service, keeping the Alaska Marine Highway System as a public service, fully fund ferry system, things like that. But when looking under the members, there's not very many communities listed under there. So, and I know City of Cordova is listed at the top, which I think is good, but I guess I'm just a little confused about this group and how active they are, or seems like there should be more communities listed if there's no fee attached and stuff like that. So I guess I just wanted to make a little comment about them. I'm still not quite sure, but it looks good. You know, we're all for the Alaska Marine Highway and need to do as much as we can. And then the other letter, same thoughts as Councilmember Allison, just getting an update on that would be good. There were some concerning things in there, so I think we need to stay on top of it a little bit.
Okay, and I think Manager Howarth had something to add regarding the Friends of the AMHS.
This particular group was a group of concerned citizens. They got organized and were pretty active a year ago, fall. They are not one of the prime movers and shakers of reform. I don't think there's harm in us being on the list, but there's certainly not a group that anyone is looking to provide guidance and inertia and heavy hitting for the AMHS working group and the future of the ferry system. So I think what Melina just shared is accurate with them. They're a group of well-interested people. They have similar goals to all of us. I think we all have the same goals, keep the ferry system in play, but they're not a real viable group at this point.
I got an email today from them, actually, that I'm about to forward to you guys, asking about signing a petition. I haven't looked at the petition.
Okay. All right, any other comments on correspondence? Okay, hearing none. We have ordinance and resolution, emergency ordinance 1191, and that is the emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, continuing the city's declaration of a local emergency and acknowledgement of a statewide emergency resulting from COVID-19 and amending the City of Cordova Health Advisory Plan to supplement Appendix A with an updated alert matrix.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve emergency ordinance 1191.
This is Melina, I'll second.
We have motion Sherman and second Meyer. Discussion to your motion, Sherman?
Sure. I'm just in agreement with this. I know the medical team has a great matrix that they use to guide us in this, and I'm in favor of following their guidance. So I would wish to see this approved.
Thank you. And to your second, Vice Mayor Meyer?
I would just echo the comments for me.
I'll just do discussion in order here. Councilman Schaefer is absent. Councilman Baylor?
I would prefer to get rid of the rainbow and just stay with the states, the green, the yellow, and the red, instead of all these green 2 and level 4 orange. So I don't really support it for that reason.
Councilman Allison?
Yeah, at risk of repeating myself once again, I don't see this as an emergency in 2 cases here. I don't think this should be an emergency ordinance. Number one, we've had plenty of time to be thinking about these procedures, and number 2 is I think we've got plans in place, and I certainly hope and don't think that emergency is the quote unquote new normal for us. I don't expect that we're going to be operating in a emergency mode forever. I think it's fine to have different levels. I think we can always declare an emergency and do mandates if the pot was to go to red. We got a report from the IMT meeting on August 26th. So said that was their last meeting until further notice. So the IMT isn't even meeting. I think the emergency side of this thing is done, in my opinion, and we need to carry forward with our precautions as we know now how to deal with things, and we need to work towards whatever that new normal is. But I just don't agree with it being an emergency ordinance or an emergency for that matter. So I will not be supporting this ordinance.
Councilman Gard? You'll have to unmute if you're speaking.
I'm sorry, I hit the button wrong. Yeah, it's my understanding that to have access to federal and state resources, fiscal and dollars, we need to fall in line with their emergency ordinances by having one of our own. So I will be supporting it for if no other reason than that. And as far as the matrix we're using different than the states, it does not deviate that greatly from the state. And it gives us a path up. We're a small community on our own. That matrix was probably structured for communities that had bigger and more robust healthcare systems than we have, more resources. That gives us a legal off-ramp to still work within the state system, but have other mechanisms to protect our community if we need it. So for those reasons, I'll be voting for this resolution.
Councilman Gleason?
Yeah, I agree with what Jeff said there. So that's my thinking. So I support this.
Okay, you've all had the opportunity to speak to the motion once. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote, please.
Okay, needs 5 to pass.
Okay, this needs 5 votes, positive votes to pass.
David Allison?
No.
Melina Meyer?
Yes.
Tom Baylor?
No.
Ann Schaefer is absent. Jeff Gard?
Yes.
David Gleason?
Yes.
Kathy Sherman?
Yes.
It's 4-2, but an emergency ordinance needs 5, so might have to talk about it at pending agenda.
Okay. So motion fails. Resolution 09-20-34, a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, supporting the continuation of a strong United States Postal Service and encouraging full funding of the service that is vitally important to rural Alaskans and all the people of the United States.
This is Melina. I move to approve.
Sherman, I'll second.
Motion Meyer and second Sherman. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, I don't see, I'm in favor of this. I think it's not doing us any harm passing it. I know things have changed a little bit since we put this to come up on our agenda here, but I think that we fully support fully funding the Postal Service during an emergency, during this time, during elections, during normal times. We heavily rely on the Postal Service. And I know that's one thing that did get brought up with Don Young when he came to town. And you know, I think the discussion there as well is just talk about how important the Postal Service is to us, to Alaska, and really the rest of the country. Connects us in a lot of different ways. So I fully support this resolution. Thanks.
Councilman Sherman, to your second.
Yes, I would agree with everything Councilman Myers said, as well as I think it's important as a rural community who depends on rural mail service to kind of lead the way, maybe other communities in our state to take action and let the government recognize how important mail service is to rural Alaska.
Okay, thank you. And discussion, Councilman Schaefer is absent. Councilman Guard.
I'm in support of the resolution. No comment.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I guess I've got a few concerns with the therefore be it resolved sections of the resolution. As everybody else, I support the mail delivery system, and I support the subsidies that it gets to have so-called universal service of the Postal Service to the rural areas and such. But I question, I guess, and I haven't figured out how to reword it quite yet, but when we say that we support fully funding, that can mean a lot of things. Does that mean that we're going to put them in our budget to subsidize them some ourselves? Does that mean that we support fully subsidizing that with the federal government budget? Does that mean we support them raising their rates enough to cover their costs and raising those across the board so that not necessarily paying for what it costs to send a package from Cordova to Nome, but what the average cost is to send a package from here to there. So I guess I don't support just saying we support fully funding, because I don't know that that doesn't mean that we intend to put them in our budget. I know that sounds ridiculous, but some people would read that as being such. So I guess if somebody else has got some better wording there, certainly support the idea of universal service and mail deliveries. Certainly support getting as much funding as they can get. I don't buy into the hype that the Postal Service is bankrupt. I think that there are some things that they might be able to do differently. And anyway, that's my thoughts at this point in time. If somebody has some better wording, unless there's some better wording, I will not support the resolution as it's written right now for those reasons.
Hey, Councilman Gleason?
Yeah, I support it. Kind of self-serving. I like to get my stuff. So,
Councilman Baylor?
No, I don't support the way it's written either. To me, this is another new shiny thing, the news media that we're going to chase. You know, there's over 40,000 postal workers are out of work because of the COVID-19. Their distribution system is old and antiquated. It needs updating. The labor, the head of their labor union basically wants overtime pay to keep people working more. So you're going to have to replace 40,000 people, pick up that overtime pay to cover those losses. That's an incredible amount of money. So there are issues, and I applaud anybody that's taking on the Postal Service and try to revamp and come up with some answers. So far, it's hit some glitches. It may or may not be working. CNBC Financial Station, they did a survey they sent out. I can't remember how many letters it was, but all the letters got to where they were supposed to be in the criteria that meets the Postal Services. The Postal Service also did their own accounting, and they are meeting it. So not everybody, but they're doing their best. So no, I think Cordova's beginning, you know, we got to be careful about kind of like the boy cried wolf too much. You know, we've got other issues. The ferry issue is probably the top issue for this community. And that's, again, we just talked about federal funding for that. That should be our focus in getting that going. I don't know what your conversations with the postmaster here in town, the mayor, the city manager, what did they have to say were the issues? They're actually there. I know the acting postmaster, I guess she is, and employee that works there, when I spoke to him, I said, well, what's the issues? And they didn't really have a firm handle on it. There were complications. But when you send out a package, like I did today, there's a credit card, or the credit card receipt, I should say. And right there down the bottom, there's a number. And that goes, and she told me that goes directly to the Anchorage office. If you want anything done, if you want to bring attention to anything, that's how you do it. Excuse me. You get a hold of these people. They've actually, the issue with our post office, combined with the service, is that the place is a wreck down there. It hasn't been maintained in 30 years. They haven't had a maintenance guy in 12 years. Things falling apart. That should be our focus. The employees put up this knee screen, which is vinyl. They did it on a weekend, and they got in trouble for doing it because they weren't qualified to do it. The countertops are unsanitary because it's broken up from mica. So if we want to do something for our local community that's feasible with the post office, that should be our focus. We should look at the outside ballast on the place. So that should be our focus, not the federal. I mean, this is a nationwide policy, and I don't know, maybe we intend to send this to Nancy Pelosi, or Lisa will march it into the president's office, but I think this is much to do about nothing. I think our focus should be where we can make changes, and I think our focus should be getting this local post office, which is a wreck, demanding that they maintain it and update it for the safety and well-being of the people that go in there and for the one. And by the way, the big door that's always open, it's open. It was open all last winter because the hinges are broken. They're afraid if they shut it, it'll fall down on somebody. So you'll get your mail. And the concern about the medical supplies, again, that's kind of out of council's purview, but if there's a concern there, then we've got direct access to Dr. Sanders. We've got a pharmacy. Let's talk with them. Maybe the providers can start them on a rotation where they get their medication instead of a week before it's expired, then they get it 2 weeks before it's expired, so they'll make sure they have it on time. So I'm not going to support this. Thanks.
Okay, Councilor, you've all had an opportunity to discuss once. Is there any additional discussion?
Mayor Copeland, this is Councilman Sherman.
Councilman Sherman.
I take to heart Councilman Baylor's points that those are pretty good ideas. We could support our own post office in their needs. but as far as this resolution goes, I still feel it's a nice statement that comes from our community that leads the way, that shows that we are in need of rural service by the Postal Service in our community. I agree there are other issues that are number one, but I still think this is a good one. And it's wording, the main resolution says we encourage full funding of this service. It doesn't say we want full funding. We support funding levels that will ensure the United States Postal Service keeps all facilities and offices open. So I don't think this does us any harm. I think it does us good. And then maybe we can use it to further good for our own postal community and support of them, which I agree completely need repair, care, and love to keep it safe for the employees and for all of us who go in there. So I'm still in favor of the resolution.
Okay, thank you. We can take up the local issue under pending agenda. Any further discussion, council?
Just one more comment, just to show you how out of whack the Postal Service is and why it needs reform. There's a logging camp down the coast here quite a ways. And when they were in operation, they had mail service. It was a contract to people like Cordova Air or other small planes would carry the mail into them every day. It got down to one person, a caretaker. They demanded, and they got mail service. For one person, there was a contract for a plane to fly from, at one point it was from Yakutat to there, and another point it was from Cordova to there. And they got mad and upset and wrote letters when the plane didn't come every day. It's just ridiculous. So when you say you support all of this, I mean, that's grouped into that. And how many other little communities and areas are the same way? You know, that could have very well have been once a week mail service or twice a week. But so no, I support, I'm not going to support this because I support what they're trying to do with the post office.
Okay. Any other council discussion from councilmen who haven't had a second opportunity? Okay, I just want to make a procedural clarification as a point Councilman Baylor brought up. But so our intention, or we would copy this since it's regarding a federal organization to our congressional delegation.
Yes,
That would
I
be
would
my
have.
suggestion. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Jeff Guard
Yes.
and Schaefer is absent. Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
No.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Tom Baylor.
No.
Motion carries 4-2.
Okay, we don't have unfinished business on the agenda. Under new and miscellaneous business, we have a rescission of disposal and method of disposal.
We withdrew that.
Oh yeah, we withdrew that. Thank you for the reminder. That item was withdrawn under the approval of the agenda. So next item is the council action regarding in-person council meeting attendance. Councilman Allison. Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if it requires a motion, I would direct staff to plan on having the next meeting in person, but have a method for call-in comments from people who might be at risk or unable to attend for whatever reason. And obviously, council already has the ability to call in to meetings, so.
Okay, so just for clarification, that will include the ability of the public to call in remotely? Okay.
I'll second that. Could I get some clarification on the motion too? This isn't requiring council people to be here. It's just, we're going to be open for business.
Right, we're going to hold regular meetings, but we're going to have public ability to be here, council ability to be here. Council's always had the ability to call in.
Yeah.
They've always had that. ability. We haven't always had the ability for the public to call in, and I want to keep that ability.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a clear motion. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Allison?
I think it's pretty clear. I think it's time that we reopened. We're reopening City Hall next week. I think that any meetings we have starting next week can be done that way, so.
And to your second, Councilman Baylor?
Nope, no comment, I agree with him.
Okay, council discussion, Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and people have the choice whether they come or not, and so I'm in favor of that.
Vice Mayor Meyer.
Yeah, I still have a couple questions. I think allowing people still to call in for public comment is kind of essential during this time, and having that available to them would be good. And then my question kind of is, excuse me, is there going to be a capacity limit on audience coming in, and how would that be handled if the need arises to limit participants coming in?
We'll have an ambassador at the front door, and if we exceed the capacity of what we can accommodate here, we will restrict access and ask them to call in.
Okay. Do you have any kind of idea of how many audience? Because I know we usually have quite a few staff that come and maybe use some of those seats as well.
We're planning on opening, if we have a hot topic issue that's going to probably attract a lot of community interest, we'll throw open the doors and to the whole atrium space, which will allow us to accommodate more people. I don't think we've actually measured out the entirety of that, but it's, 30 plus people could easily come in here and socially distance with those doors open. We'll have the air exchange going full bore. This being a more contemporary building, it has air exchange and other things that allow us to keep the building safe. So I think, again, we're still figuring out those numbers, but if we do have a hot topic agenda item that's going to attract people, we'll make sure that we have those numbers locked down, and we will have someone at the front that will be counting how many bodies we have in the building.
Just for reference, Vice Mayor Meyer, we have 12 seats in the inner auditorium here, and 3 of those are occupied by staff. That's been kind of the norm for the last few meetings.
Well, we're going to have to extend this
to create enough seating. Yeah, depending on how many attend, so yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then
I think there's going to be very many in the audience.
The first,
that was my other question. Does staff feel comfortable for our next meeting to have that one be open to the public, or when is an ideal time? Because I know you guys are opening City Hall and timing for that.
Yes. Because that's 2 weeks hence, so we'll have next week to kind of make sure our systems are in place and that things are working well. And then the following week, we'll have an opportunity to test that with council. We will be adaptable. If things need to be changed or if it isn't working, we'll revise and try to make it work. And if at any point in time people feel uncomfortable or that it's unsafe, we can backtrack.
and then just to clarify your first point, Vice Mayor Meyer, that was part of the motion that the public would have the ability to call in and participate remotely. So.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think all my questions have been answered on this, and I feel comfortable voting in favor of this. Thanks.
Councilman Gard.
Okay, got a couple questions. Since we did not renew the emergency ordinance, does that mean we no longer have a mask rule, or any of the rules we had, many of that are no longer?
I will say that we have to have an emergency ordinance on the ground. The state is still under emergency orders. All of our communities need to be under emergency orders. I was going to ask clerk if by not doing this, is this just an addendum to what we have? I'm not sure how legally we do this. We may be putting ourselves in a really bad position at this very moment in time. And I'm unclear if we've just undone something that we need to still have in play.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yep.
I would agree.
And Susan is agreeing.
The other part of it was that if we do still have a mask ordinance in place after not renewing the emergency order, are we going to enforce a mask rule here when we haven't elsewhere, or what are we going to do?
I think, I don't know exactly legally what we just undid and what we need to maybe reconsider quickly, whether it's this meeting or an emergency meeting. I will have to get clarification on whether our existing rules and mandates still stay in play by voting down this particular ordinance. And I don't have an answer.
So Councilman Guard, for the purposes of facilitating the meeting, I'm going to separate those items because I suspect the manager will consult with the attorney tomorrow. The manager does still have the authority to declare an emergency order, and since we don't have one, and then council gets to take that up within 10 days, 14 days.
I think we got rid of that.
So, yeah,
No,
we may
I
have
understand that, but
yeah.
I'm just asking, are we going to have,
I would plan
have a mask ordinance, are we going to?
I would plan on the protocols for next meeting being the protocols that are in place for this meeting, with the exception that people will be able to attend in person. So that would include.
We'll have item 15. Right?
So you're asking questions, but you have a discussion.
Are we going to enforce a mask ordinance for people attending the council meeting?
That's not the motion in front of you.
But
So-
he's talking about the meetings in person. He wants to know if we're going to.
The meeting,
enforce.
are we going
Yes.
to enforce a mask rule at the meetings?
Yes, we're going to maintain the protocols. We're going to the motion was to maintain the protocols that we have for this meeting, except that council, it'll be open for council and public attendance. And if they plan to do that, they need to have a mask on.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay. Do you have further discussion?
No, I think I've said that.
Okay. Councilman Allison.
I can save it for the COVID discussion. Just to follow up that last question, we didn't undo anything. We just did not do a new thing. And the previous emergency order had an expiration date, or it said until rescinded. We have not rescinded anything. We did not undo anything, as has been stated several times here at this table. Nothing was undone. We just did not do a new thing. So that's my point.
Emergency ended September 1st.
September 1st, and it would have extended the emergency order.
Correct.
Beyond September 1st.
Correct.
Councilman Sherman?
Maybe a self-serving question. If we don't feel comfortable, or if we live with some family members who are susceptible, and if we call in, I mean, is that still considered a recorded presence if we don't feel
Yes.
comfortable attending?
Council always has the option to, currently has the option to call in remotely under normal circumstances. And that was included in the motion, that council can still participate remotely. Was that your question?
And it's not held against us?
No, it's not recorded as an absence. That was my understanding, and they're right.
That's
You
correct.
had it highlighted in the packet, right?
Only because it was never the norm, but I think we're just in a new place.
Okay.
It was always only that you teleconferenced in if you were out of town. Of course, occasionally people did from town if they, for some reason, but now it'll be more common. I was noting that it was legal for them to, at any time, teleconference it.
Okay. Was that your discussion, Councilman Sherman?
Yes, and it's just a temporary situation for me. Thank you.
Okay. You've all had a chance to discuss the item once. Is there further discussion?
Just a thought.
Councilman Baylor.
And just a suggestion, and you guys will, as you're opening, you'll work through this, but again, I don't see any hot button issues, but sometimes they do come in. We do get a lot of people. Perhaps one of the things you could do at the greeting at the table is do you plan to testify? If we have people that want to testify and we're full, maybe we could come up with a system where we escort one out and escort one in or something like that, so they don't feel like they weren't able to physically be here. But you'll have time to work it through.
Okay, further discussion? Council? Okay, roll call vote, please.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent. Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Melina Meyer.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, motion carries. Next item is a discussion of COVID-19 emergency response.
So I just want to clarify, so the emergency management team did stand down as an entire body. So, you know, there's a sizable group of people who participate in that committee, and it's based on making sure all the pieces and parts are in place. What is still in place is an emergency management team that's made up of our health team, medical team, myself, Heather Brannon as the emergency coordinator for the city, and our public information team. And the decision to do that was based on the smaller group are the folks that are most needed on the ground right now. We don't need to have someone managing the things that aren't active right now. But at any point in time, if this smaller group decides that there is a need for a bigger response, that we will reactivate the entire team. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We still have an emergency management team. We met this morning. It's made up of the Native Village of EAC, 2 representatives there. We have someone from the Alanka Center, CCMC, myself, PIO, and Heather. So there's 6 of us on the ground, and we are doing the active work on the city's response. So I just want to be clear about that. And again, we do need to have an emergency order. Our last one, it did expire on September 1st. I can put an emergency order in place tomorrow at 8 a.m. until such time as we have an opportunity to discuss the issues that council's having with the health response that the emergency management team has requested. So I've been trying to get in touch with Holly tonight, I've not been able to, just to get clarification on what we do or don't have. I think we don't have an emergency order, which we absolutely do need. And if it's okay with this body, I will put that in place just to maintain what we had before. It will not include the health team's recommended 4 color-coded systems. So I'll at least get that on the ground, which will include the mask rule. And I'll get clarification from our attorney tomorrow just to make sure. But we do have a placeholder to make that happen, so I'm not overly concerned.
What's that?
Can we recess the meeting so we can talk to the attorney? Because she's texting me.
Oh, she is, okay.
She's texting you. Well, before we recess, though, I'll have council discussion, and then I can remind the council, it sounded like there may have been a little bit of confusion about when the deadline on the existing emergency order was, when the other one was. Council can certainly move to reconsider. So Councilman Allison, then Baylor.
Yeah, I guess I would question too, if we were talking to the attorney, whether or not the manager has the authority, if we're not under emergency rule right now, which it sounds like that expired almost 2 days ago now, that I'm not sure that the city manager has the authority to declare an emergency without some kind of council approval, but maybe, I'm not positive on that. We wouldn't be under emergency operations at this point in time. Actually, we haven't been for almost 2 days, so anyway, that's my comment before talking to the attorney.
Yeah, well, I think it was until rescinded, but anyway. Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, and I guess for my part, I didn't make a motion to amend, going to the state green, yellow, red, because I didn't think there'd be support of it. But if there was support of just simply going to the green, yellow, red of the state, then if somebody wanted to rescind it, perhaps there would be support to move that direction.
Okay, just for clarification, you could move to reconsider, but you wouldn't be able to amend that motion. So.
And I guess what will happen, the color coding system was put together by the IMT and the health group. And it's not just a simple matter of saying we're going to go with the state. They have a very clear metrics that is tied to what the school's doing with their reopening. So I think we would need to revisit that color coding system and ask them to modify it in order to put something in place that that works with their emergency response metrics. So I'm not comfortable making decisions on the part of IMT and the health team. But do you want me to read?
It's kind of a moot point, Helen, because you can't amend a motion that's failed and then that has passed and then comes up for reconsideration.
Okay.
You have to reconsider the motion as it was presented.
Okay.
Or as it failed or as it passed. So.
Okay.
Is Holly on the line?
She's emailing. She's not available to call right now. She said, she basically said that council needs to extend the emergency order. She's looking into whether we tied our rules to the state declaration or the city declaration. She says funding is triggered by a local declaration, and that at this point, our option might be to take a position that the state emergency triggers the aid under statute. So we don't need a city ordinance declaring a local emergency, but she's not entirely sure. She said, big question is council's intent and how do we respond narrowly to protect the city's COVID rules and requirements and its funding. So that is her response to that.
Okay.
That it would be a risk to
Yes.
hope that we're covered under the state's declaration.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Guard.
is there any way parliamentary-wise we can reconsider this ordinance as a whole for a shorter period of time till next council meeting, just so we make sure we got ourselves all covered, and then we can take it up again at next council meeting?
Yes, you could move to reconsider emergency ordinance 1191, and that would require a second, and the council could vote on it again. And if it would still have to pass by a majority of 5 because it's emergency ordinance.
I understand. But would it be a modification to make the sunset clause of this the next council meeting, so we could reconsider it the next council meeting?
I don't think that was the part of the ordinance that was being voted no by the two.
I understand.
Okay.
But
That doesn't help.
if we can't modify the ordinance and we have to vote it up, we have to do it with the new matrix, the 5-color matrix or the 5-position matrix. If we can do it for just a 2-week time period before the next council meeting, would that be amenable to the 2 no votes?
Well, you can, it wasn't extended to a time certain, So in the way the emergency ordinance in the agenda was worded, it was extended until the state of Alaska declaration of emergency is repealed by the governor or the legislature. However, if council extends the emergency ordinance, you can always move to rescind the emergency order at the next regular meeting. So you would have the tool to just make it effective until the next meeting if you wanted to. You're the city council. You can, as a group.
Okay, well, my question is, to the 2 no votes on it, would that be amenable with you, just to make sure we got our bases covered, and we can take it up next time, just to make sure we're not opening ourselves up to anything we don't want to open ourselves up to?
I'm not going to invent procedure. I mean, I think the city council understands that the emergency declaration needs to be in place to maintain our funding. If you vote not to do that, procedurally, you could find that the state's declaration is adequate to
Well, we're waiting to hear an answer back from the lawyer. All I was asking was that if Councilmember Baylor and Councilmember Allison would be amenable to a reconsideration vote if we bring it up.
You're going to have to make that motion and then let them discuss it. So,
Motion.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, so since we didn't rescind the ordinance that was going to time out unless we rescinded it.
Did already.
Isn't it that's still what the city's under?
No, because
Rescinded?
No, because the emergency declaration was only through September 1st. So this, it was through yesterday. And so the emergency ordinance would have extended it, but that was voted down. So the emergency declaration in Cordova is done.
I thought that it was, we had to rescind that to make it go away.
That would have ended it before September 1st. If you'd rescinded it before the.
Do you have a motion on the table to reconsider?
I did not hear you make that motion.
I so moved. I moved
Okay.
to reconsider.
We have a motion to reconsider emergency ordinance 1191.
Councilman Sherman, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. So would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Gard?
I think I already have.
Okay. Councilman Sherman.
And I too would say that I think we should approve this, and I'm happy to have an emergency meeting if we need to prior to the 16th, but to make sure that we can receive funding from the state, that we don't make any errors, just keep this in place, and then work together as a group to compromise to find something that's agreeable for us at either a special council meeting or the meeting on the 16th.
Okay. So I'll go through the list of council for discussion. I just want to remind you, though, that you can't amend a motion to reconsider.
Point of order.
Councilman Allison.
Reconsider. A motion to reconsider must be made by a person who voted. Well, we've got that changed in our code, so anybody can make the motion to reconsider. The board can now make a motion to amend it, or they can discuss and revote it as it is.
And that's a city code?
No, that's from the Robert's Rules.
Okay. My summary sheet said you can't amend a motion to rescind, or to reconsider. Sorry, was that to rescind or reconsider?
No.
Reconsider.
Okay.
But once the motion is in front of them again, it can be amended.
Okay, so you can't amend the motion to rescind, but once the motion's on the table, you can reconsider it. Okay, gotcha. So, and I think what you're starting to refer to is that the motion to reconsider has to come from someone who voted in the negative.
Well, our
generally,
code says,
but our code does not, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so a discussion, Councilman Allison.
no, I'll happy to talk about it again.
Okay, you are, it's your discussion, your turn for discussion. So you'd be happy to talk about it in a special meeting, or?
No, I'd be happy to reconsider the motion. That's all we're talking about right now. is
Okay,
whether we're
yeah,
going to reconsider
gotcha.
or not.
Okay, Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I guess I'd be happy to reconsider it too. I like to simplify, go with the state colors. If there's a big heartache with the doctors, if this was their idea and they're strong for it, then I can support that. But I would like to see it go back to them and say, let's just stick with the state, make it simple, keep it simple.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at.
All right, thank you. So just for clarification, it only requires there's a simple majority of council to actually reconsider the motion and put it up for a vote. But then to pass it is going to require 5 positive votes.
Correct.
And it will be able to be amended once it's on the table for consideration. So, Councilman Meyer.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to reconsider.
Councilman Gleason.
Me too.
Okay, it sounds like you've all decided. So roll call vote, please.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
and Schaefer is absent. Tom Baylor.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so emergency ordinance 1191 is now on the floor for discussion. Councilman Guard. Yes. Is that Councilman Sherman? Councilman Sherman, discussion.
I, again, will reiterate, I'd like to see that we pass this. I saw the door open for more discussion from Councilman Baylor. And I'm sitting here looking at this, and maybe we do ask for stronger recommendation from our medical team. We've relied on them through this entire thing. If they feel strongly that we need to have this level 2 green versus what the state has, I would like to hear that from them as well. This was what they had proposed. I have been willing to accept all of their recommendations to this point in time, but maybe, and I still am very cautious about all of this, but if that's what it will take for our group to compromise and agree and keep an emergency order in place, then I would say we pass this to maintain our funding situation and ask the medical team to advise us on the differences and their emphasis on the 2 levels of green.
Councilman Sherman, Dr. Sanders is listening to the meeting and she would like to call in and comment. Is there any objection from council? I'm seeing no in the room here. Is there any objection online?
No objection. We'd appreciate to hear.
Okay, Dr. Sanders, if you can just call in on the call-in line 253-6202.
Hi, Clay. I'm here. So this is Hannah Sanders, and I just want to go over kind of what you guys see in front of you is that 5 level has been presented as an amended level. So my understanding of this is a continuation of the plan that was put in place by council, and the medical response team used the council's 5-level plan that was preventative management previously approved, and I don't remember the date. And so we have been using that as kind of a working document to align our medical matrix using small community epidemiology to try to fit small community, state, and then our 5-level plan. The schools, when they reopened, they really needed a color coding system, so we started looking at how we could integrate the colors that fit with the state, fit with the schools, fit with Cordova's 5-level, fit with the state 3-level, the red, yellow, green that they often use. And that's how we ended up with 2 greens because the level 1 is kind of something that doesn't exist right now in our current situation because we are under a pandemic. So level 1 kind of is when everything goes away. So we don't really need that level at this time as part of this response, but it's there. The green is really, we're in a safe zone and we can feel confident still sending our kids to school. And so if we made that any other color, because Cordova chose to use this 5-level system, we would be in a position where it would be hard for the schools to reconcile with the state how to open. So the medical response team has been using 5-level epidemiologic data, as well as hospital capacity, as well as availability of resources to help guide the response and the movement between this. Because this is changing so quickly and we're going off of the state's guidance and the CDC guidance, we didn't feel like the complete matrix needed to go to council. And I'm not sure that the change of color, you know, if that's an issue, I don't think that needs to go either. That's just how we help guide. The school is at this point using a very similar set of tools and colors to make their decision. So everybody's in line here, and it does line up with the state as well as the state's Smart Start Reopen plan. So I don't know if there's more questions or if that kind of answers some of those questions for that document.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Dr. Sanders. Questions, council? And Dr. Sanders, if I recall this, so the state is also using the color-coded system, right?
Some of the state's documents do have some color coding with red, yellow, green, but when the state looks, and sometimes we see the governor go through and he says we're in this color based on testing, we're in this color based on hospital capacity. So they are using the red, yellow, green when they're looking at some of the very specific matrix. They haven't put out that guidance that I've seen for us to use in small communities in that same red, level, green distribution. Other places have the epidemiology broke up into more categories, like the 4 categories, which is why we've arrived with kind of where we are.
Okay. I'm not hearing council questions, so I'll go ahead and continue with discussion. Started with Sherman, Councilman Guard.
Personally, I don't see any issues with having the 4-color 5-position thing. It doesn't really deviate from the state's position. It does give us some flexibility and stuff. It gives us 2 greens. I mean, the first green that you talk about is policy. It's a world without COVID. So, you know, using the state's green, yellow, red. And as the doctor was saying, we don't live in that world anymore. So if we can have a second level of green that still gives the indication both that they are safe to send their kids to school and they're safe to, you know, go about business and have a life, I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
The orange, I mean, I don't have an issue with gradation here, and I don't know that it causes any problems with confusion from the state system or any of that. So I'd be in favor of it being adopted as is, but I'd be willing to talk about it.
Councilman Baylor.
No comment.
Councilman Schaefer is absent. Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I was in favor of it first time, and I'm still in favor of it. So I do think that simpler is better. I don't know. I mean, I think either one of the color-coded things will work. So as long as the places that are going to be impacted by it are in agreement, that's the important thing. So that's all I got.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, my policy hasn't changed at all. I don't necessarily agree with all of the scare tactics of not qualifying for anything anymore, those kind of things, but I'm still gonna vote no.
Vice Mayor Meyer.
Yeah, I was in favor the first time around, and I am this time around as well. I don't know if the sticking point is having this advisory at all, or if it's the numbering system with the color coding system, but it seems like some people in some institutions use the number level system and some use color coding system. So I think this one is just putting the colors with the numbers together on a local level. And at least for me, I think it's really helpful having the levels and the colors for our community, with the medical team doing it and transitioning for schools, spaces, can make residents and businesses feel comfortable doing with what they are. If we move to a yellow, orange, obviously that changes, and I think it's just a really easy to use system. I haven't had any trouble with it, and I definitely noticed when we went from yellow for just a short amount of time, really, to green again. And I think our community really brought it back to green because we were in yellow, and we realized in our community that there was some cases and we needed to follow the guidances, and we did that, and we're in green, and we're doing a lot better now. So I don't have a problem with it as it is. We need this emergency order, in my mind, passed tonight. So whatever we need to do to get that emergency operations, and we can debate the levels and the colors later on, in my opinion. But I think we do need to get this emergency resolution passed tonight, and if that means amending it later, then let's do that. But so I would just encourage those who are planning on voting no or voted no last time to please speak up if we need to make an amendment to get this changed or make it feel more comfortable passing it tonight. I don't know what we can do, but I think we need to. So thanks.
Councilman Sherman.
Councilman Sherman, and then Allison.
I was going to call for the question.
Council Allison had asked to make comment before you called for the question. Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I just, in response to the Vice Mayor Meyer's question on what the problems are with this, I don't have a problem with the numbering system. I don't have a problem with that procedure, with having a color coding system and having those kind of things as a plan for what to do. I do not believe that this is an emergency ordinance. It should have been started 2 meetings ago so that we could have run it through as a regular ordinance. We knew this was going to expire 40 hours ago, which it did. We haven't had an emergency ordinance in effect for the last 40 hours. You know, what's that, or 44 hours? What's that going to do for, you know, if we're not qualified for funding, are we not going to get paid for the last 2 days? I mean, there's just a whole slew of things. And I recognize that we want to be sure we're getting funding and those kind of things, but I just think that we've had 6 months to prepare for this and get these things in, and I'm going to vote no because I don't believe it's an emergency. I don't have a problem with the color coding, those kind of systems, but I do have a problem with it being thrown out as an emergency ordinance.
Do you have something from Holly?
I just wanted to just clarify, because this isn't a normal situation, this COVID will always be an emergency ordinance, not a regular ordinance. So I just wanted to clarify that we have to use the emergency ordinance because at any point in time, we would stand it down or stand it up. So I just want to make sure everyone understood that is part of the state response, and how we activate emergency management team is by emergency ordinance, and how we react to this COVID crisis is emergency ordinance only.
Any further discussion, council?
Call for the question.
Roll call vote, please.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent. Tom Baylor,
Yes.
David Allison,
No.
Jeff Guard.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1.
Okay, council, I'm not sure that I had wrapped up the COVID discussion before there was a motion to reconsider. In fact, that was made during the discussion. So any further discussion on the COVID-19 emergency response?
Other than I'd like to see a secured, heated, lighted structure out at the airport for those folks.
Okay.
And I think that's something we knew we were supposed to have or would need to have, so I think we probably should move on that.
Okay. Further discussion, council?
I'd asked a question earlier about enforcement, and I probably didn't make it very clear and asked it at the wrong time, so the wrong person got stuck with it. But have we made any headway on clarification on what the state's willing to enforce on their own mandates and rules they put out there, or are they still not doing anything?
They have not given instruction to state troopers or others, and I just wanted to respond is that as it stands now, whenever a complaint comes into City Hall or police or EMT, how we've been handling it is investigating. It's like, okay, so what's going on? So for instance, the other day, I got a call that there were a bunch of sports fishermen in the harbor unmasked cleaning fish. So I called Harbor Master and learned that based on the bear issues last year and the year before, that those fishermen and the guide services and things were asked to not go to Fleming Spit, but to use the harbor. New information, I didn't know that. So then we identified who the guides were and the various housing places that were hosting the folks that were using that. And we called them, Heather called them on the phone and said, hey, you need to be much more careful with your guests and how they're utilizing our spaces. So I think we resolved that to the extent we could. We didn't go directly to enforcement, we went to information. And Harbor Master said he would make sure that he made the rounds, and we are also asking that if anybody sees anyone, do let us know. Same thing with some guests who were, rumor was they were at the airport and they went immediately to a grocery store and a liquor store to get supplies without doing the appropriate strict quarantine. And so again, we've communicated to the guide services and other places that, and hotels and other bed and breakfasts and places that this is really, really important. So we don't have enforcement. We do have local enforcement around masks and things like that. We've never issued a citation. We've found that we've been able to enforce, if you will, with communication and information. But yeah, there isn't a lot of teeth that we have available to us to enforce from the state. So that's where we are. We are actively following up on complaints, questions, and again, Heather Brannon has been really great about following up with all sorts of businesses and individuals, and we've got our ambassadors working hard in that too.
And I wasn't trying to beat bushes about our staff or enforcement efforts here. I was directly trying to get to non-action on the state's part for enforcement. I don't know how we go about getting any response from the state. I don't know if you've approached the state about it.
Yes, we all have. So Alaska Municipal League as well has been addressing that on the behalf of all the cities that are members of that organization to try to figure out, okay, you're asking us to do all this stuff, so now what? And it is an unresolved issue with the state.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, COVID-19 emergency response? Hearing none, pending agenda. I think what did we pushed up a discussion about?
Well, I have something that Sam might need next week, a special on the 10th or 11th, depending on how those RFPs come in on the 8th. So is noon on either Thursday or Friday next. Hopefully okay with 4 of you.
How would that work for council if we, for the pandemic-related infrastructure and whatnot, to keep those tight timelines going? Any objection to Friday? I'll start there. Council prefer a noon meeting?
That works for me.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
seeing nods.
I
It's,
prefer noon meeting as well.
Okay, Friday, the 11th at noon, maybe, let's, well,
yeah,
I guess let's.
if we need one, we'll
She gone?
do Friday the 11th at noon.
Okay.
And before we get too farther along, I did want to really thank Dr. Sanders. I know she continues to listen to the meetings in case council has any questions, and just really appreciate again her just incessant support of the community through the pandemic and council. So
I had just that the CIP list comes before us quarterly. I think we did it in June. Does anybody feel like we need to look at it again? Or we can wait just like December, just before the session is the next time to look at it.
I think maybe, I'm sorry.
council, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, maybe send it to us email.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to start putting it in the packet so that it's there and every time.
Okay.
So we look at it. Okay.
I think it's
So that sounds
quarterly.
good. Otherwise, 2 weeks and we'll be in person.
Councilman Allison.
Do we need to do anything with the governor's office for, or with the legislature for making sure that $5 million is in there for a harbor thing? Is it
Yes.
currently in there?
Bitney and Helen and I talk about that frequently, that's, it is not in the budget. We want to try to make sure we get it in the budget. And as we have a little more clarity on at least who's going to be in the regular election. And so we want to definitely take it up with our legislators to make sure we get that harbor matching.
If we needed a resolution or
there.
anything, just get that on the agenda.
It probably wouldn't hurt.
We did submit a capital request to the state for that again. And now we'll have to work it through. If there's any capital funds in the budget for 2021, we'll have to do some work to activate.
Yeah, if we can get it in the governor's
Yeah.
budget, that's the
Yeah.
best option,
Yeah.
because then it starts out
Yeah, yep. We're on
Absolutely.
that.
that option.
Yeah.
Okay, we can we'll strategize with Bitney too. It might not hurt to just have a letter directly to the governor and ask him to put it in there, and call Ben Stevens or whatever, and emphasize. I think I'd be hopeful we could get that support.
Okay.
Good point.
One-
That is a priority. That is our priority. One priority, really.
One other thing I'd like to have a discussion on, it doesn't have to be the next meeting, but I'd like to have a discussion on our impound lot and the impound lot situation, from previously being, couldn't use it for anything but a snow lot to now it's the only secure place in the world to keep our impound cars. But now we've got a new impound lot down here at City Hall, or the old City Hall that I see. And I'd just like to have that discussion on impound lot. Where's it at? Where's the best place for it? Is it really the snow lot, or is there a better place for it? I know we've had the discussion in the past, but not with the current manager and current staff. It seems to change every city manager we get. It seems to change the purpose of that lot we have down on the North Hill. And I'd just like to, if we're going to use that lot, then get it consolidated. Right now, we've got junk cars everywhere.
Okay. All right.
But for the RCAC letter, you wanted, no, No action immediately, but for me to ask Robert to come in and report to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's what I heard, right?
Yeah, I don't
That's-
think that
yeah.
letter was asking for anything in particular. It
Yeah.
was just
It's kind of
saying that
informational.
what they were
Right.
doing. But
Okay.
I had mentioned that we would like to have at least twice a year a report to council, and it's definitely time now, especially in light of the letter. So I think I will mention, just revert to the mayor's report, I guess, for just a minute, because it's significant and it's an important. There's $192 million roughly balance in the EVO's trustee council fund. There is a effort to perhaps relocate those funds and restructure them. That process has been going on for a couple of years now. I'm a little disappointed it hasn't come to city council or I guess to the communities themselves in the oil spilled region. I would just say we're fortunate to have the manager that we do that has a lot of insight into that and how that process works. So she and Brittany and I have been doing a little bit of footwork there, but yeah, and that's all I have for now. I just want to mention it. So something that may come up on a future agenda. So council online, any other pending agenda or calendar items?
Yeah, this is Melina.
Yes.
During our work session, there was investment committee was brought up. I don't know if that was something that the manager and finance director, they talked about wanting to put it on there, so maybe we should put that on the future agenda item as well.
I'll put it on pending agenda for that. It'll be coming before council for, are they appointing this committee? No, not really. It's more like
That's what I was going to ask. There can be an advisory committee to
Yeah.
the manager that isn't a formal standing committee of council. I think that's what I heard. Is that all right with council?
Yeah, however they wanted it, I just wrote it down as something
Okay.
talked about putting on the pending agenda, so wanted to bring it up.
I'll put it on as so that you'll know that you'll be hearing from them at some point in the
Okay.
future.
And I think, yeah, I'm sure the manager would bring that committee forward and then report to council. So if that sounds all right. Save Susan some footwork. Anything else on pending agenda, council? I'll just mention to the public, we are going to take audience participation here in a minute, and that number again is 253-6202. Any further pending agenda items? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and go to council comments, but we will take any calls that come in for audience participation at 253-6202. So council comments, and Council Schaefer is absent. I'll start with Councilman Sherman.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to, a couple of things to get on the record. One was, I know we rescinded number 13, the rescission of that disposal of land, and that's wanted the public to know that was referred to an email between the planner and council, so that there was some reasoning behind that. And then I wanted to thank Ken for a really concise and informative work session. I learned a lot that I didn't know, and I really appreciate that. And I like the idea of the committee. I was going to give some kudos to Parks and Rec for all they have done to maintain that airport testing tent, and we all knew that was going to blow away as soon as this started. And I agree with Councilman Baylor and others that we should put something a little bit more spookum in there for those people who are doing that testing, which is really important to our community. I also saw Parks and Rec washing the Bedarkey Rec Center, and boy, what a difference that makes. You go by, you can see what they've done and what they haven't done, and it makes the building look brand new. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was, I didn't get a chance to attend, but recognizing Bill Howard's long and dedicated tenure with the city. I think he was one of the longest employees ever with the city, and I thought the crew recognized him quite worthily, so I wanted to pass that on.
Thank you. Council comments, Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, just, thanks to staff, and, that's about it.
Council comments, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, thank you, staff, and, let's see what I have written down here. Yeah, at least for the travelers coming into Cordova, I think one perception or assumption that a lot of people are making is because they got that test before traveling to Alaska that they're free to roam around. Masks, at least from my experience, haven't been hard to communicate, and people have been happy that we do have a local mask mandate. The sticking point that I seem to be educating and re-educating and saying pretty often is just because you have that test, you still have to do strict social distancing, which doesn't allow you to go into stores or restaurants or anywhere like that. The only way to get out of that strict social distancing is taking a second test in Alaska 7 to 14 days after arriving to Alaska. So there's a little confusion, I think, about, and I think Dr. Sanders kind of mentioned that a little bit about sometimes that testing, how when you get negative testing, your caution goes out the window a little bit or gets loosened up beyond requirements. And that is a challenge. I think a lot of people just assume, and maybe they're getting a lot of information, so having to say it, re-say it over and over again is kind of just part of the process here, but it is a challenge for sure, people having that negative test and arriving. So good luck to the ambassadors and everybody else, because it is a challenge, and I do feel that a lot. And then I wanted to mention the local post office that Councilmember Baylor brought up, and I think those are all really good points, that infrastructure that we have here locally, and talking to the employees locally about what the problems are, but I think everyone kind of recognizes that that building hasn't had a lot of attention and definitely needs some attention. It is our local post office, and by the resolution, we all know why post office is important to us, and the infrastructure here locally is also important. So maybe we need to think on that a little bit more. See what we can do for our local post office. Then encouraging people to vote. That's all coming up. And then also the census. I know I've talked to a census worker a couple times now. I filled out live. I know our addressing is a challenge in Cordova, and I think that makes it even more of a challenge for the census workers and how things are playing out. So even if you made sure, even though you did it online, you have a census worker come up, please talk to them, because sometimes it has to do with the addressing of your location matching up. So to get counted, you definitely need to work that kinks out with them. And thanks to staff and all the hard work to get the city all open, and our council meeting is open, and the school's open and everything. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks for the reminder, Melina. That post office was the other one I was trying to recall. So Helen and I can put our heads together and get a letter out to the Anchorage powers that be, touch base with our local postmaster, and extend council's concern for maintaining their facilities here.
Go take some pictures and send them with it.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually.
That
picture's worth a million.
Hasn't been washed in 30 years. It is gross.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd be glad to advocate for that. So, council comments, Councilman Ellison.
Just for the clerk, I guess, more than anything, that I will be gone from September 29th to October 15th, and then unavailable for in-person things for the next 10 days to 2 weeks, whatever it takes to get cleared there. I should be available by phone anytime after the first. So anytime from the second on, I should be able to call it of October. Just a note that if if all of our property taxes were paid with a credit card, it would cost us $75,000, which, well, that's another portable shower unit, or, you know, I mean, that's a lot of money. It adds up to a lot, so, shouldn't be any reason why they can't send a check in for their property taxes. I had a call from a member of our public recently who doesn't do electronic things very well. Tried to do our online survey for the thing and said he got to question number 2 or something and it messed up, and anyway, so he started looking for phone numbers, and mine was one of the few phone numbers listed. So he called mine, and I don't know who all's phone numbers is listed there, whose are correct, but if you're willing to put your number out there for the public, if we can get the clerk to update that list so that people know our numbers to call. But anyway, they just made that comment that it's very difficult for them to call in the meetings. It was difficult for them to use the electronics for everything. They preferred talking to people and being there in person. And there are, you know, that was just one call, but there are probably other people that are in the same boat. So if we're doing surveys and things like that, and I know we've encouraged people to call if they didn't do that, but continue to encourage them to communicate in whatever method they're comfortable with, and we should be able to handle pretty much all methods. But and that's the last thing I had was just want everybody to understand and be clear on. I don't disagree with our procedures or with our plan with the IMT. I understand that and appreciate the work that everybody's been doing towards all of these things. But I think I speak for at least 1/7 of our community that thinks that an emergency doesn't last 6 months or 12 months or however long this emergency is going to last. I think we've set up our procedures, we've planned well, we know how to deal with it, we know how to protect ourselves, we know all those things. Now we are implementing those things, and we will continue to implement those things. But do we call that an emergency? I have a hard time calling that all an emergency. I think it's critical and it's important, but I guess I have a different definition of emergency. But I certainly appreciate everybody's work, and I understand the medical teams and the management teams' position, and I don't disagree with necessarily the whole concept. I just don't believe it's an emergency. So, thank you.
I want to thank you with the help with the rules today on that motion to reconsider too. It's these cheat sheets are great, and that training with Jurassic Parliament is fantastic. So I've been trying to incorporate those, and may trip a little bit here and there, but I really appreciate Susan scheduling that, and encourage council to and all the boards and commissions to participate in that. It's very straightforward and very helpful. So council comments, Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, quite a few things. In regards to the cars out here, I've been meaning to say something like that for months. Maybe there's a reason they have to have one for policing or that's safe for the court, but we got a string of them out there now, and the city should set the standard, not lower the standard, and something needs to be done about that. There was a mention about you couldn't get out and about until you had your second test. Actually, it's the second test for 14 days, just for the public that may be listening. I was talking with an employee today at the post office to get their take on everything, and she told me that they've had numerous people even volunteer. They said, we'll come in and paint this, but you just can't. The rules prohibit it, excuse me. Working for the city, although I'm in the retirement mode here, I probably won't be bidding any of this stuff, but on the last go around, and it thought to me, I always served on the PISWAC board, and I was also doing work for them. So when I was at the board meetings, and I actually voted on approving the agenda or the budget, And so I spoke to their lawyer before that, and I don't know if it's the same wording, but he just basically said, no, just excuse yourself from voting on that. So then you're not voting to spend that money, therefore you don't have a conflict. So maybe for future contractors or people that do vote on that, that's something to think about or they can run by the lawyer. If you're not voting for those funds, then you don't have a conflict. And then that also is council has never voted on, to my knowledge, voted on spending any of this COVID money. So I don't know if there was actually a conflict there. We're going to get some more, the sale of property is going to come out again. And again, there was a snafu with this. And I want to just, for the council's benefit, those of you that haven't been through this process, I want to tell you that this process is very well executed by staff. I don't think they could do a better job. And not everybody's a contractor, not everybody's dealt with contractors, not everybody's run projects, so they may not know what questions to ask, but it's incumbent on them to ask the questions. It's not incumbent on staff to hold their hand. That being said, Leif does an outstanding job of making sure these people know. When he tells them you're going to have to get a survey, it's incumbent on them to go find out what a survey costs and all these other things. So if you're thinking about the last two of them here that, like, geez, what can we do better? I don't think we can do better. I really think it's the best we can do. Staff does an outstanding job. And if you're going to be developing property or buying property, it's incumbent on you to do your due diligence and know what you're getting into. And I think if somebody comes in and wants to buy property, there should be a fee, and at $250, $500, and it's non-refundable. It's just like when you go buy a house and you go through the process, you put your earnest money down, and for some reason you back out, you don't get that money back because you've created a bunch of work for the staff, for closing companies, for everybody. And I think that's the way it should be. And then we'd only get people that are actually serious about following through and would do their due diligence, and we wouldn't be in these positions because it creates a lot of work, not only for staff, but for council, for the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if anybody's got questions on this process, council, give Leif a call, discuss it with him. He's very knowledgeable about it. So is your Public Works Director. She was in that position before. So I would encourage you to really, before you made any comments negative about this, talk to them because they do an outstanding job. So that's all I have.
Council comments, Councilman Guard.
First off, I'd like to offer a heartfelt apology to Dr. Sanders for dropping the enforcement bomb on her, which I really did not mean to do, but anyway, I did, and I profusely apologize for it, and I appreciate her gracious answer. I appreciate everything the staff has done. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate the council reconsidering the emergency order reconsideration. I think that was an important thing to do tonight. Thank you all. That's all.
Okay, we haven't had any calls from the public, so we have one remaining motion.
Adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion, a second to adjourn. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we're adjourned.
One of those garage doors, when you go to the back.
His headset on the flats. Oh.
He said,
It's discreet, and it wouldn't make the noise when I was there, but April, so she literally, she goes like